Hey, welcome back. This is Brian. I'm going to be going over the mathematics on the College Board 394 test. We're going to look at the math section in class or for homework. So if you got a TI-84 or TI Inspire, any version, or any of the high-end Casios, you're more than welcome to use those. The list is pretty extensive on what you can use or bring in. And it's actually shorter for what you can't bring in. You can't bring in a calculator that has a QWERTY keyboard where it says QWERTY at the top of the keyboard. Now, a couple of things that I want to talk about before we get into this test. This is a really challenging test in that it has a lot of easy problems, and you'll see that as we go through here. Some of these are literally do this, do that, pretty easy stuff you've done quite a bit. And they're worded in a very easy way. But then again, there's some tricky ones, and so I'll try to make sure I highlight that when I get to the problem. And before we get to the test, one last thing, calculator usage. You're allowed to use your own calculator, the one you normally use, like on a computer keyboard. You can't bring in one that makes noise that you have to plug in, one of the ones that you might see in an old movie that has a tape that comes out. You cannot bring in an accountant. You can't bring in a human being to do your calculation. So you can't do that, but you can bring in the calculator you normally use. But here's the best part, is that you'll be provided through the Blue Book app that you'll be taking the actual test on. You'll be able to use a version of Desmos. So that has a grapher on it. You can do calculations. You got to just know how to use that. So do practice up on that. We'll talk more about that in class. So we're going to the 394 test. Question 1. What percentage of 300 is 75? Now, the best way to interpret that is out of 300, what's 75? So 75 out of 300. I can put that in a calculator, or I can reduce that down. There's 175, there's 475s. So it's 1/4. And 1/4 as a decimal is 0.25. And as a percent, that'd be 25%, which is A. So A is your answer. Question 2. What is a solution to the given equation? So they gave me x squared over 25. Remember, 25 is 5 squared. Equals 36. Remember, 36 is 6 squared. And so I've got x squared over 5 squared equals 6 squared. Now I can take the square root of both sides. So take the square root of this side, I can take the square root of that side. And when I take the square root of a square, well, the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 5 squared is 5, square root of 6 squared is 6. And now I can just multiply both sides by 5. So x could be 30. And 30 is one of the answers, and it's the correct answer. So B. Question 3. Hannah deposited a fixed amount into her bank account each month. The function f of t equals 100 plus 25t gives the amount in dollars in Hannah's bank account after t monthly deposits. So look at that. That's in a form y equals m times x, t in this case, plus b, the initial value. It's in a linear form. Here's the slope. Here's the y-intercept when t was 0. So her fixed amount was the $100. Well, what's the best interpretation of 25 in this context? Well, it would be the amount of dollars that you go up for every t. And so with each monthly deposit, it'd be going up 25 bucks. So A would be the correct interpretation. Question 4. In question 4, Nasir bought 9 storage bins that were each the same price. He used a coupon for 63 bucks off the entire purchase, and the cost for the entire purchase after the coupon was $27. What was the original price in dollars for one storage bin? Well, if we let B equal the cost of one bin, because that's what we got to find. The question asks for the cost for one bin. So B, there it is. It showed up. And then I know that, well, he bought 9 bins and he got 63 bucks off and he ended up paying $27. So 9 bins must have originally cost $90, which means that one bin, if I divide both sides of that by 9, would have been $10. So 10 is the correct answer. Question 5. Right triangles PQR and STU are similar. So PQR is similar to STU. And P corresponds to S, so P and S correspond. They named them in order. And measure Q is 18. Well, that's got to correspond to T. And we got to know what is the measure of angle S. Well, if P is 18, well, pardon me. Let me start that again. Got a bad itch. I'm redoing this problem. Question 5. Question 5. We're given 2 triangles. PQR, PQR, and we're told it's similar to STU. Now, when they name them in this way, that means P corresponds to S, same angle measure. Q corresponds to T, same angle measure, and R would correspond to U. And R and U are both right angles. And they say, hey, if these are similar, where P corresponds to S, that's what we just said, if the measure of Q is 18 degrees, well, that means T is also 18 degrees. And since we have a right angle at R and U, then S and P must both be 90 minus 18. And so the measure of angle S is the same as the measure of angle P. These two have to be congruent because they're similar. And in congruent similar figures, corresponding angles are the same measure or congruent. So the measure of angle S has to equal 90 minus 18, as we said before, which is 72 degrees. So B is the correct answer. Question 6. The scatter plot shows the relationship between 2 variables, x and y. So we see a scatter plot. It suggests a line that starts near 10 and goes down towards 10 on the y-axis and down towards 10 on the x-axis as we move from left to right on the x-axis. Which of the following equations is the most appropriate linear model for the data shown? Well, let's put a line on there and see what it looks like. So I'd be somewhere, maybe balance it out, kind of like that. And I can see that my y-intercept, pardon me, is somewhere like 9.4. And I can see that I have a negative slope. It goes down. So I should have a positive y-intercept because I'm comparing it to y equals slope times x plus y-intercept. So that takes out A and B because, well, those are way too small. 0.9 is way down here. So it's got to be C or D, and the only one that has negative slope is D. So it's not C, it's D. And D is the correct answer. We're given an equation, 2.5 times B plus 5 times R equals 80. The given equation describes the relationship between the number of birds and the number of reptiles that can be cared for at a pet care business on a given day. If the business cares for 16 reptiles, so R equals 16, then how many birds can it care for? So 5 halves, 2.5, times the number of birds plus 5 times 16 has to be 80. Or 5 halves B plus 80 has to be 80. Well, that means that B's got to be 0. They can't care for any birds on that day. So A is the correct answer. Question 8. In question 8, if x over 8 equals 5, what is the value of 8 over x? Well, since this is not an inequality, it's an equality, I can just flip it over. So if I flip over the left side, well, the right side is 5 over 1, so this would be 1 over 5. I merely reciprocated the entire equation, and your answer falls right into your lap. So 1/5, or I could have put 0.2. Question 9. In question 9, we're given a system of 2 linear equations. The solution to the given system of equations is at xy. Well, we can see the slopes of the two look like they're different. We could put them into y equals mxb form, but I've found that often on SAT, when you're given a system like this, you can use the process of elimination. I can get rid of the x's because we want to focus on y, so I'm just going to multiply the entire equation, second equation, by -4, because the first equation being 24x plus y equals 48, well, if I multiply -4 times the second equation, I get -24x minus 4y equals -288. I got a calculator, so I can do that quite quickly. And then also I got to do is add these two equations together. Well, this becomes 0, and this becomes -3y, and this becomes -240 when I just add -288 to 48 and -4y to y respectively. And then I divide by -3, and I get that y has to be 80, and that is the correct answer. Question 10. Line T in the xy plane has a slope of -1/3 and passes through this point 9, 10. Which of the following equations defines line T? Well, I'm going to use this idea of the point slope form, that y would be slope times x minus the x value of a given point plus the y value of that given point. So the line would be y equals -1/3, that's the slope, x minus 9, x1 is 9, plus y1, which is 10. And if I clean that up, I get y equals -1/3 times x plus 13, because -1/3 times -9 would be +3. So D is the correct solution. Question 11. The function f of x equals 206 times 1.034 to the x power models the value in dollars of a certain bank account by the end of each year from 1957 through 1972, where x is the number of years after 1957. Which of the following is the best interpretations of f of 5 is approximately equal to 243? Well, that would be 5 years after 1957, which would be in 1962. And if we look at that idea, well, I'm comparing it to the amount at time t equals the principal or initial value times 1 plus some rate as a decimal to time. And here, well, x is t and r is 0.034. And so if we look at that, it should be the amount in the bank account in year 5, which means B is the correct answer. Question 12. In question 12, for a certain rectangular region, the ratio of its length to its width is 35:10. And if the width of the region increases by 7, by how much must the length change to maintain this ratio? Well, there's a bunch of ways you can look at this thing. I mean, if you consider the rectangle, we would have had the fact that the ratio has to be maintained 35:10 in whatever we do. So this is going to be 7 times something, 10 times something to 35 times something. And so what we did is we basically took the idea that a ratio of 35:10 would be the same as a ratio of 35x to 10x, but we could also look at that as 3.5:1. And so if I have this 3.5:1 and I increase the width by 7, then what would my increase here be? And that's no different than looking at 35:10 would equal something plus 35/17. Well, I can take that thing and I'm going to end up with 10 times my mystery number plus 350 has to equal then 17 times 35, which is 595. I take away 350 from both sides. I'm going to have 10 times my mystery number has to equal 245. So this mystery increase must be 24.5. So I've got to go up by 24.5, or it has to increase by 24.5. B is your best friend. Question 13. Square P has a side length of x inches. Square Q has a perimeter that is 176 inches greater than the perimeter of P. The function f gives the area of square Q in square inches. Which of the following defines f? So they told us that the perimeter of P was 4 times x. That's the sum of the 4 sides that are all x in length. So the perimeter of Q should be 4x plus 176. And if I divide that thing by 4, 4x plus 176 over 4, then that should be a side of Q. Then I get x plus 44. So the area of Q must be that squared. So x plus 44 squared. So A is the correct answer. Question 14. I'm given that 14x divided by 7y equals 2 times the square root of w plus 19. The given equation relates the distinct positive real numbers w, x, and y. Which equation correctly gives us w in terms of x and y? Well, note something right away. I can rewrite this thing as 2 times x over y. And the 2's I can factor away. So x over y would equal rad w, whoops, that's not a w, w plus 19. Well, square both sides. Then x squared over y squared should equal w plus 19. So w would equal x squared over y squared minus 19. And that's C. Question 15. Point O is the center of a circle. So here's a circle. And here's point O. And we know that the measure of arc RS on the circle, so here's R, here's S, and we're told that this arc measure is 100 degrees. And we want to know what is the measure in degrees of its associated angle, ROS, this angle right here. Well, it just so happens that the angle with a vertex at the center of the circle, here O, has the same degree measure as the degree measure of the arc it cuts from the circle. So this has to be 100 degrees, and this angle has a measure of 100 degrees. So there's your answer. Question 16. The expression 6 times the 5th root of 3 to the 5th times x to the 45th, all under the radical, times the 8th root of 2 to the 8th times x, all under the same radical, is equivalent to a times x to the b, where a and b are positive constants, and we want to know what's the sum of a and b. Well, note, I can use exponential notation. I can write radicals like this. I could say the first one is 6 times 3 to the 5th, x to the 45th, and the exponent 1/5 means the 5th root. And I can write the other one as 2 to the 8th x, and that's equal to the 1/8 power. So that's a 8th root of that phrase inside the parentheses. Now the power rule from exponents says, well, I can then apply that power as a product to the exponents inside. So this becomes 6 times 3 times x to the 9th, the first term, and that's times 1/8 2 to the 2 to the 8th to the 1/8 power would be 2, and x to the 1/8, so x to the 1/8. And now I can take 6 times 3 times 2, which is going to be 36, and then I'd have x to the product rule says 9 plus 1/8. And so, well, I should have then a plus b should be 36 plus 9 plus 1/8, which I can get a common denominator, and I would see that this would be 360 over 8. So 361 over 8. Or I could put it in as 45.12. Oh, actually, I only have 5 spaces, so 0.13 or 45.12. Either of those 3 were potential answers. Question 17. A right triangle has side lengths of 2 root 2, 6 root 2, and root 80 units. So that's 2 root 2, 6 root 2, and 80 I could write as 4 root 5. Now, the longest of those 3 would be the 4 root 5. You can put them in your calculator and see that. So that's got to be the hypotenuse because this is a right triangle. So these are the legs. And I've got a situation 2 root 2, 6 root 2, 4 root 5. So 1/2 area is 1/2 the base, 2 root 2, times the height, 6 root 2. So that's going to equal 1/2 of 2 times 6 is 12, and root 2 times root 2 is 2, and these guys will factor, and 12 is the correct area of this triangle. So B is the correct answer. Question 18. The expression 4x squared plus bx minus 45, where b is a constant, can be rewritten in this factored form, where h, k, j are integer constants. Which of the following must be an integer? Well, if I were to multiply this thing out, I'm going to get hx squared, and then I'd have plus k plus jh times x plus kj, and that has to equal, well, 4x squared plus b times x minus 45. And so right away I know that h has got to be 4 because that's the coefficient of x squared. And, pardon me, b has to be k plus jh. And kj has to equal negative 45 because that's the constant term. And they have to be the same value. And I know that h, j, and k are all integers. They're integer constants. And so if I take the fact that kj is equal to negative 45, then j has to be negative 45 over k. And so this thing has to be an integer, means this thing has to be an integer. And j can be positive or negative, which means that this thing has to be an integer. So D is your answer. Since j is an integer, then this has to be an integer because negative 45 divided by an integer has to be an integer in this case. Question 19. Question 19, I have to warn you ahead of time, it is a tricky problem. Because they focus you on finding a, they want the value of x. So y is equal to this parabola, 2x squared minus 21x plus 64. And y is also equal to this line with a slope of 3 that has a y-intercept at a. So those two equal one another at the point that they intersect. But in this given system, where a is a constant, the graphs of the equations intersect at exactly 1 point. Exactly 1 point. And so for that to happen, well, let's check something out. Note that we already said that 2x squared minus 21x plus 64, 4, Brian, has to equal 3x plus a. So 2x squared minus 24x, if I take 3x away from both sides, plus 64 minus a would equal 0. And if I divide everything by 2 there, I'm going to get x squared minus 12x plus, this will be now 32 minus a over 2, would have to equal 0. And they said, since the system only intersects at 1 point, then this thing must have a single solution, which means it's got to be one of those parabolas that comes down and just touches at 1 point, which means that on the axis of symmetry, that's where the vertex is, which means we only need to look at these two numbers. We don't need to even worry about a now, because I know when x equals negative b over 2a, I'm going to be on the axis of symmetry, which would be the x value of the vertex, which is now just touching the x-axis at that 1 point. And so that's at 6. So x must be 6, and C is your solution. That is a tricky problem. Question 20. An isosceles right triangle. So isosceles means that the legs are the same length, and then the hypotenuse. And because the legs are the same length, that's like half a square with a diagonal. That's a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. And they said that the hypotenuse was 58 inches. If I divide 58 by root 2, I get the leg length according to the reference at the front of every mass section. The leg length times root 2 is the hypotenuse length. So the hypotenuse length divided by root 2 is the leg length. And those two guys are the same length. And we want to know the perimeter of this particular triangle. Well, it's got to be 58 plus the sum of the two legs, which is 58 root 2. Well, that's C. And that's the correct answer. Question 21. In the xy plane, a parabola has a vertex at 9, negative 14. It intersects the x-axis at 2 points. Let me draw that. So 9, negative 14, the vertex is here, and to intersect the x-axis at 2 points, it's got to open up. Got to open up. And the equation, if it's written in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are constants, well, we know right away that a's got to be positive. We know that right away. And we also know that we can write this in vertex form because of the fact that we know the vertex point. Then y has got to be equivalent to a times x minus 9 squared minus 14. The vertex form of y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, where hk is the vertex. Well, this would be y equals a times x squared minus 18x plus 81 minus 14. And if I clean that up, I'm going to get y equals ax squared minus 18ax plus 81a minus 14. So there's the c value, and the b value would be the negative 18a, and the a value is a. So I know then that a plus b plus c has got to be 64a minus 14, which I can actually write as 2 times 32a minus 7, which shows me that a plus b plus c is even. And so it can't be b, it can't be a. And I also note this, is that if a plus b plus c equaled negative 14, if this was true, well, then that means that a has to be 0. Because if this equaled negative 14, then a, 64a, is 0. And so it can't be c. And there's only one answer left. It's got to be D. Tricky. Question 22. Question 22, function f is defined as negative a to the x plus some b, where a and b are constants. In the xy plane, the graph of this thing has a y-intercept of 0, negative 99 over 7. And I want to know, hey, what's the product? If the product of a and b, pardon me, is 65 over 7, what's the value of a? Well, if I look at this thing, then I must have something like this, that y equals negative a to the x plus b minus 15. And they told me when I plug 0 in for x, I get negative 99 over 7. So negative 99 over 7, and plugging 0 in for x here makes this negative 1. Because a to the 0 would be 1. So negative 1 plus b minus 15. Which is the same as b minus 16. Well, then b must equal, add 16 to both sides, 16 minus 99 over 7. And that's going to be the same as 112 over 7 minus 99 over 7, which is 13 over 7. So if b is 13 over 7, I know that, well, a times 13 over 7 has to equal 65 over 7. And in order to get that, I would have had to multiply this thing by 5. So a has to be 5. But I could have taken the reciprocal of 7 13s and multiplied both sides, and I would have still gotten 5. 65 over 13 is 5. 5. And you're done with the first part. Congratulations. All right, now we're on to section 2. Question 1. A fish swam a distance of 5,104 yards. How far did the fish swim in miles? And they tell you that a conversion from yards to miles is given. So if I divide 5104 by, and that's in yards, by the way, 1760 yards per mile, well, the miles are going to flip upstairs, the yards will cancel, I'll be in miles, and that'll give me in a calculator 2.9 miles. So B is the answer. Question 2. The point 82 is in the XY plane. So 8, 2, if I were to graph this thing, here's Y, here's X. And that is in quadrant 1. And that's to the, above the x-axis and to the right of the y-axis. So x and y are both positive. They're both greater than 0, which means that A is the correct answer. Question 3. F of x equals 7x plus 1. This is a linear thing. It describes a line if we graph it. It gives the total number of people on a company retreat with X managers. What is the total number of people on a company retreat with 7 managers? Well, they want F of 7, which is going to be 7 times 7 plus 1, which is 49 plus 1, which is 50. 50. Question 4. In question 4, we should have an exponent right there. In question 4, the function f is defined by f of x equals 270 times 0.1 to the x. What is the value of f of 0? Well, f of 0 should be 270 times 0.1 to the 0 power. And anything except 0 to the 0 is 1. And so this would then be 270, which is the answer, D. Question 5, long word problem. To estimate the proportion of a population that has a certain characteristic, a random sample was taken from the population, and based upon that, the estimate proportion of the population that has the characteristic is 0.49. And it has an associated margin of error of 0.04. And so this proportion should be between 0.49 plus 0.04, or 0.53, and 0.49 minus 0.04, which would be 0.45. And so given some sort of percentage of the population, we just took plus or minus the margin of error. Well, if I look up above, then A is the correct answer, because it's very plausible that we're going to be somewhere between these two values. So A is the correct answer. Problem 6. A moving truck can tow a trailer if the combined weight of the trailer and the boxes it contains is no more than 4,600 pounds. What's the maximum number of boxes that this truck can tow in a trailer that weighs 500 pounds? Well, if I take the max, which is 4,600, and take away 500, then I'm going to have 4,100 pounds worth of books that I can carry. So if I take 4,100 and I divide it by the average poundage per box, which is 120 pounds, then I get 34.16 repeating. And I can't take a partial box, so I can take 34 of these boxes of books without going above the maximum weight allowance for the truck. So 34 is your answer. A is correct. And we move on. Question 7. What is the positive solution to this thing? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these guys to both sides because I want to make the 4x squared and the 7x positive. And I'm going to have the 0 equals 4x squared plus 7x minus 36. And this is factorable. 0 would be 4x minus 9, x plus 4. But then you could graph that thing and see where the zeros are. So x in this case is going to be, well, what the first thing 0 would be 9/4. Or x could be -4. And they want the positive one. So B is your answer. Question 8. The table summarizes the distribution of color and shape for 100 tiles of equal area. So we have the shape, square, pentagon, and we have colors. We're given the total for each column and the total for each row. Now, the language in these two-way table problems is what drives the answer. So listen to what we're saying here. If one of these tiles is selected at random, so that would be out of 100. What is the probability of selecting a red tile? Well, the total of all reds is 30, so it'd be 30 out of 100, which is the same as 3 out of 10, which is the same as 0.3. So any of those answers were good to go. These are the ones that you could easily grid in. Question 9. We're given f of x equals 2x plus 3. This is a linear thing. We can see the slope is 2, the y-intercept is 3, because we're comparing it to y equals m times x, where m is the slope, plus b, the value on the y-axis that the line crosses the y-axis, the y-intercept. So for the given function, y equals f of x, what's the slope of line j if line j is parallel? Well, it would have the same slope because parallel lines have the same slope. They never intersect. And so 2 is the correct answer. Question 10. In question 10, a proposal for a new library was included on an election ballot. Radio shows stated that 3 times as many people voted in favor of the proposal than who voted against it. A social media post reported 15,000 more people voted in favor of the proposal than voted against it. Based on that data, how many people voted against the proposal? Well, what they said was 4 equaled 3 times against. And that against plus 15,000 that voted for was equal to 3 times against. And so if we look at that, then 15,000 has to equal to A. So A would be 7,500, which means that A is the correct answer. Question 11. In the figure, lines M and N are parallel. Fx equals 6k plus 13, and y equals 8k minus 29, then what's the value of z? Well, first note this, that x and y are what are called vertical angles, so they have to be equal to each other. So we know right away that 8k minus 29 has to equal 6k plus 13, which means that 2k would have to be 42. So k equals 21, and we plug that back into either of those, but we've got y right here, so I plug it back in here and I get y equals 139. Well, now we know this, that y must be supplementary, i.e. add to 180 with z, because this measure here would also be equal to z because of alternate interior formed by a transversal across parallel lines. So if I take 180 away, 139 away from 180, I get that z equals 41. And that is the correct answer. And C is correct. Question 12, we're given negative 3x plus 21px equals 84, which I can rearrange. I can factor x from both of the terms on the left and rewrite that as 21p minus 3 times x has to equal 84. And they say there is no solution to this. Well, if that's got to be true, then this thing here must equal 0. Nothing is going to make that true. So if 21p minus 3 equals 0, then 21p has to equal 3, and p would be 3 over 21, which equals 1/7. So if p is 1/7, this thing has no solution. So B is your answer. Question 13. We're given f of x equals the quantity x minus 10 times the quantity x plus 13. This is a quadratic. In fact, they're showing us right here that if we can imagine we have 1, 0 at negative 13, that would make that thing equal 0. We have another 0 at 10. That would make the first quantity 0. And we want to know, where would this thing reach a minimum? Well, it's going to be on the axis of symmetry. And that is going to be halfway between the zeros. And so I can take that if 10 plus negative 13 over 2 would be the average of those two numbers, and that's going to be negative 3 halves. So if x equals negative 3 halves, we're on the axis of symmetry, which would be the vertex point, which would be the minimum, potentially, of this quadratic. It does open up, so it would be the minimum. And D is still the answer. Question 14. The function f of x equals 1/9 of x minus 7 squared plus 3 gives a metal ball's height above the ground in inches, x seconds, after it started moving on a track, where x is between 0 and 10. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the vertex of the graph? Well, if I look at that graph, I know the vertex is going to be at 7, 3 because it's in vertex form. And it's a parabola that's going to open up. And so it's going to be going along this path. And the best interpretation of the vertex would be the lowest point of its path, or the minimum height it was above the ground, because that would be when x is 7. That's the minimum of that graph. So A is your best answer. Number 15. In triangle JKL, J is the right angle. So let's draw a triangle. Here's J, here's K, here's L. here's the right angle. The cosine of k, so adjacent over hypotenuse, would be 24 over 51. And I want to know the value of the cosine of L. Well, I know something right away, that 24 equals 8 times 3. And 51 equals 17 times 3. And 8 something 17, well, the middle would be 15, because 8 squared plus 15 squared equals 17 squared, or 17 squared minus 8 squared. So this has got to be 45, because that is equal to 15 times 3. So all we did was take an 8, 15, 17 and multiply it by 3. Well, then the cosine of L is going to be 45 over the hypotenuse, which is 51, which we could also write, we know right now, as 15 over 17. So there's your answer. Number 16. We're given negative x squared plus bx minus 676 equals 0. And this has no real solution. Well, this is a quadratic that opens down. We can see that. But it's also in ax squared plus bx plus c standard form. And I know from the quadratic formula, when b squared minus 4ac is negative, the thing in the radical in the quadratic formula, remember that if this is true, then x has to equal negative b over 2a plus or minus rad b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And if the thing inside the radical is negative, then my zeros are not real, they're complex. Well, I want this to be true then. So b squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 676 has to be less than 0, which means that b squared has to be less than 4 times 676, which equals 2 squared times 26 squared, by the way. So b then has to be greater than 0, and it has to be less than 2 times 26, if I take the square root, 52. So it can't be 52, so the greatest that b could be would be 51. If b was 51, because it's a positive integer, and we stuck that in here, then this thing is negative, which means we got no real solution. So 51. Question 17. We're given a line on a graph, and we can see what the line is. I can see that the slope is negative 1/4, and I can see that the y-intercept is 4. And I can see this line, y equals 2. If a new graph of 3 linear equations is created using the system of equations shown, 2 lines we got there, and this one, well, look at this one. This is y equals negative 1/4 x minus 4. And so this is going to be parallel to the line above, and it's going to go through, that's not very parallel, but, and so it's not even going to cross the other 2 lines at this particular place. It won't equal 2 when x is 8, because to be a system, we have to have all the lines in the system cross at the same point. So this would have no solutions as a result. So A is the correct answer. Question 18. We're given that f of x equals 5,470 times 0.64 to the x over 2. Function gives the value in dollars of a certain piece of equipment after X months of use. If the value of the equipment decreases by P% each year, what is the value of P? Well, check this out. We saw something like this earlier. We're comparing it to the idea of a growth decay formula, simple growth decay. And we have our initial value. Here it's 5,470. And this is times 1, and we're decaying. We're going down. So minus our rate. And then this would be per time unit. Well, no, this is in months. This would be in months. And so we should have then that f of t, if we put it in years now, is going to be 5,470. 1 minus 0.36, because that's the 0.64, to the t. And the value of P is 36. So C is your answer. Question 19. We're given a data set called A, and the dot plot represents 15 values in data set A. Data set B was created by adding 56 to each of the values in data set A. Which of the following correctly compares the medians and ranges of data set A and B? Well, if we looked at data set B, it's going to look shape-wise, 5 dots, 4 dots, 3 dots, 2 dots, here a dot, there a dot, everywhere a dot, dot, 1 dot. It's going to have that figurati shape, just like A does. But the only thing we did is we moved everything to the right value-wise. So 22, add 56 to that, 78, and then 79, and then 80, and then 81, and 82. And note the range here is going to be 26 minus 22 is 4. And the range here is going to be 82 minus 78 is 4. So we know right away that the ranges are the same. But the median, well, the median here, if we count in, was 15 values. So we would count in to the 8th one. So 5, 6, 7, 8. The median of this set would be 23, where the median of this set would be 79. And so we have the median of B is greater than the median of A. And if we peruse the answers, well, the median is equal. No, it's not that one. The medians aren't equal. No, the medians aren't equal. The median of B is greater, right? And the range is equal, yes. Let's check the other one. The range, no, it's not that one. It's definitely C. So C is the correct answer. Question 20. In question 20, the equation x squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 49 represents a circle. Circle B is obtained by shifting circle A down 2 units. So what we did is we moved the y value of the center down 2 units. And the radius will still be the same. And if I look at this, I want to compare it to the general equation for a circle, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals radius squared. So the center of this one, looking at that, circle A must be centered at 0, 1. And I move that thing down 2 units, which means I'm going to take 2 away from the y value. So now it's going to be at 0, -1. So I should have x minus 0 squared plus y minus -1, which would be y plus 1 squared. And it's the same radius, so 49. And if I look up, I see that D is that exactly. So D is the correct answer. Question 21. 2 identical prisms, rectangular prisms, so boxes, each have a height of 90 centimeters. The base of each prism is a square, and the surface area of each prism is given as K square centimeters. If the prisms are then glued together along a square base, the resulting prism has a surface area of 92 over 47 times K square centimeters. And I want to know, what is the side length of each square base? Well, let's name this thing right now. Let's call this X. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it X because that's easy to write. And I'm going to draw a little picture. I've got a square base box that is 90 centimeters tall. So going back in there and down there. So I know this is 90, and this is going to be X by X. And if I were to do what they ask, what I'm going to have then is I'm going to have, I'm going to have a square base of X. Then it's going to be twice as high or long because I glued together 2 square bases. And you can get the impression that what I did then is this is still X by X, but now this thing is 180 long this way and this way. So you can get a picture of it. Now, what do I know? What do I know? What do I know? Well, if I look at the first thing, I know right away that K is going to be equal to the 2 square bases, 2x squared, plus the 4 sides, which is going to be 4 times 90 times x. So 4 times 90x, because one side would be 90 times x. So K is equal to 2x squared plus 360x. I want to save that. I need that. Because now if I focus on this, well, this thing, 92 over 47K, is going to have to equal twice the surface area of just one box, because I got 2 of them. But then I take out the 2 bases that are glued together because they're not involved in the final surface area. And I know what K is. I know what K is already. I mean, K is 2x, 2x squared plus 360x. So I can plug that in. But, I'm going to look at it this way, that I'm going to add 2x squared to both sides, and then 2 minus, well, that would be 2 2K would be 92 over 47K minus, pardon me, I wrote it backwards. Let me go back here. 2K would be 94 over 47. That's 2 times K. And then I'm taking away the 92 over 47 times K. So I added 2x to both sides and subtracted 92 over 47K. So now I know that 2x squared equals 2 over 47K, which is the same thing as saying that 47x squared equals K. And now I know that, well, I can take this idea and put it together with this to find out what x is. So 47x squared has to be 2x squared plus 360x, which means that 45x squared has to be 360x. Divide both sides by 45 and I get x squared equals 8x. So x has got to be 8. And luckily, that's one of the answers. So B is your answer there. That is a tricky problem. I'm not denying it. And I tried to condense it to where it was just the essence of what you needed to look at. I hope that that helped you. Question 22. 210 is p% greater than 30. What's the value of p? Well, I could do this quite easily. 210 divided by 30 would be 7, which is the same as 1.00 plus 6.00, which can be interpreted as 100% plus 600%, which means I went up by 600%. So 210 is 600% greater than 30. And that makes sense because 100% of 30 is 30 and 600% is 180, and that's 210%, or 210, pardon me. So that was an easy way to do it. Or I could use the idea of percent change. The percent change formula says this: I'm going to take new value minus old value over old value times 100. And then that'll be a percent change. If it's positive, it means I went up by that much. If it's negative, it means I went down by that percentage. So if I take 210, which is new, minus the old, 30, and I divide that by the old, then and multiply by 100, I get 600%. So we went up, because that's positive, by 600%. We're that much greater. Either way, the answer is 600. I hope you did well on this test, and I hope to see you again.